The radio scanner came to life at 11:47 p.m., cutting through the steady noise of our ambulance as we sat parked outside the 24-hour diner on Maple Street. Unit 23, respond to 1847 Westbrook Avenue for a medical emergency. Caller reports their neighbor is acting strange and won't respond to knocking. My partner Jake looked up from his coffee and shrugged. Another wellness check. Probably just Mrs. Henderson forgetting to take her meds again. I started the engine and flipped on the emergency lights. After 3 years working nights in this small town, you get used to the routine calls. But as we pulled up to the address, something felt different. The house sat dark except for a single window on the second floor that flickered with an odd blue light. Not the warm glow of a television or the harsh white of a phone screen. This light pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. The woman who called us out stood on her porch next door, arms wrapped tight around herself despite the warm October night. "I'm Sarah Chen," she said as we approached. "My neighbor Tom hasn't answered his door for 2 days. His car's in the driveway, and I can see that weird light in his bedroom window. It started 3 nights ago and hasn't stopped." Jake knocked on the front door while I walked around back to check for other entry points. The backyard felt wrong somehow. The grass looked too green, almost glowing in the moonlight. A sweet smell hung in the air, like overripe fruit, mixed with something medicinal. "No answer," Jake called out. "Sarah, do you have a spare key?" She shook her head. "Tom's lived here for 20 years. Keeps to himself mostly. Never married. No family that I know of." I tried the back door and found it unlocked. "We're going in," I told Jake, grabbing our medical kit and flashlight. The door opened with a soft click, and immediately that sweet smell hit us stronger. My stomach turned slightly. The kitchen looked normal enough. Clean dishes in the sink, a half-eaten sandwich on the counter that looked fresh. But the air felt thick, almost syrupy. Each breath took more effort than it should have. "Tom," Jake called out. "This is EMS. We're here to check on you." No response except for a soft humming sound coming from upstairs. Not quite human, but not quite mechanical either. We climbed the stairs slowly, our flashlight beams dancing across family photos lining the wall. But as we got higher, the photos seemed to change. The same man, presumably Tom, but in each successive picture he looked different, thinner, paler. In the last few photos near the top of the stairs, his eyes appeared completely black. The humming grew louder as we reached the landing. It came from behind a closed door at the end of the hall, where that blue light seeped underneath like water. Jake reached for the handle first. "Wait," I whispered, grabbing his arm. Something about this whole situation screamed wrong. In 3 years, I'd seen overdoses, heart attacks, strokes, accidents. This felt different. Maybe we should call for backup. Jake shook his head. "It's probably just some new medical equipment. You know how these older folks get with their CPAP machines and oxygen concentrators." He turned the handle and pushed the door open. The blue light flooded out, temporarily blinding us. When my eyes adjusted, I wished they hadn't. Tom sat in the middle of his bedroom, but calling it sitting wasn't quite accurate. He hovered about 6 inches above his bed, perfectly still, arms at his sides. His skin had turned a translucent gray, and veins of that same blue light pulsed underneath like a road map. His eyes were open but completely white. No pupils or iris visible. The humming came from him, a low vibration that seemed to resonate in my bones. "Jesus Christ," Jake breathed. He stepped forward with his medical bag. "Tom, can you hear me?" As he got closer, Tom's head turned toward us with a movement too smooth, too fluid. No human neck moved like that. The humming stopped. In the sudden silence, we could hear our own breathing, heavy and loud. Tom's mouth opened, but instead of words, More of that blue light spilled out like smoke. "We need to leave," I said, backing toward the door. "Now." But Jake was already reaching for Tom's wrist to check his pulse. The moment his fingers made contact, Jake went rigid. The blue light from Tom flowed into Jake's hand up his arm, spreading like ink in water. Jake's eyes rolled back, showing only white, and he began to hover just like Tom. The humming started again, but now in harmony. 2 voices instead of 1. I ran. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door. My hands shook as I grabbed the radio from our ambulance. "Dispatch, this is Unit 23. We need immediate backup at 1847 Westbrook. Officer down. I repeat, officer down." Unit 23. "What's the nature of the emergency?" came the calm voice of dispatch. How could I explain what I'd just seen? How could I make anyone believe it? "Unknown medical emergency. My partner is unresponsive. Send police and fire department backup." It was the best I could manage without sounding completely insane. I sat in the driver's seat, engine running, ready to flee if necessary. 15 minutes later, 3 police cars and another ambulance arrived. Officer Martinez approached my window. "What happened in there, Davis?" I told him everything, knowing how it sounded. His expression shifted from concern to skepticism to something like pity. "You've been working a lot of doubles lately. Maybe the stress is getting to you." "I know what I saw," I insisted. "Jake went in that room and something happened to him. He's still up there." 2 other officers had already entered the house. I waited for their radio calls, for confirmation of the horror inside. But when they emerged 20 minutes later, they were alone. "House is empty," Officer Rodriguez reported. "No signs of disturbance. Back door was unlocked like Davis said, but nobody's home." "That's impossible," I said, getting out of the ambulance. "Jake is in there. Tom is in there. They were both in the bedroom." I pushed past them, running back into the house despite their protests. The bedroom was empty. No floating men, no blue light, no humming. Just a normal bedroom with a neatly made bed and closed curtains. Even the sweet smell was gone, replaced by the mustiness of a house that had been closed up too long. "There's nobody here," Martinez said gently. "Maybe your partner stepped out for a smoke or went to check the other side of the house." But Jake didn't smoke, and his medical bag sat exactly where he'd dropped it when that blue light touched him. I spent the next hour searching every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing. It was as if Jake and Tom had simply vanished. The other paramedics checked me for signs of carbon monoxide poisoning or drug exposure, but all my vitals were normal. Sarah Chen confirmed that Tom lived there alone and that she'd definitely seen the blue light. But when pressed for more details, she became vague and uncertain. "Maybe it was just his television," she said, contradicting her earlier statement. I might have been mistaken about how long it had been since I'd seen him. The official report listed Jake as missing under suspicious circumstances. A search team combed the area for 3 days but found no trace of him or Tom. The case went cold within a week. My supervisor put me on mandatory leave for psychological evaluation. But I knew what I'd seen, and more importantly, I knew it wasn't over. Because 3 days after Jake disappeared, I started receiving calls on my personal phone, always at night, always around midnight. When I answered, I heard that same humming sound, sometimes with 2 voices, sometimes with more. The calls came every night for 2 weeks. I changed my number twice, but somehow they still found me. During the day, I felt almost normal. I could convince myself it had all been some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But when darkness fell, the reality of what I'd witnessed came flooding back. I started staying awake all night, afraid to sleep. Coffee became my best friend, and I learned every late-night talk show by heart. But exhaustion eventually won, and I would drift off in my chair around dawn. That's when the dreams started. Always the same scene, Jake and Tom floating in that blue light, their eyes white and empty. But in the dreams there were others with them, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all hovering in perfect formation like some twisted choir. They would all turn to look at me at once, their heads moving with that same unnatural fluidity. Their mouths would open, and that humming would grow louder and louder until I woke up screaming. After the third week, I drove back to Westbrook Avenue. Sarah Chen's house was empty, a for sale sign planted in the front yard. According to the realtor, she'd moved out suddenly, citing family emergency, no forwarding address. Tom's house looked abandoned too, though no sale sign marked the property. The windows were dark and weeds had started growing through cracks in the driveway. I sat in my car for an hour, watching for any sign of that blue light, but saw nothing unusual. That night, the phone calls stopped. I should have felt relieved, but instead I felt like prey being stalked by a patient hunter. Something was building up to a bigger event, and I was powerless to stop it. I returned to work after passing my psychological evaluation. The department psychiatrist concluded that I had experienced a stress-related episode and recommended light duty for a month. My new partner was a rookie named Collins, eager and talkative. He didn't know about Jake or what had happened on Westbrook Avenue. For 2 months, everything seemed normal. We handled the usual calls, heart attacks, car accidents, domestic disputes. I started to relax, to think maybe the whole nightmare was behind me. Collins proved to be a good partner, competent and reliable. Then came the call that changed everything. December 15th, 2:33 a.m. Unit 23, respond to 892 Pine Street for a medical emergency. Caller reports multiple family members acting strange and unresponsive. The address was only 6 blocks from Westbrook Avenue. As we drove through the quiet streets, I noticed that several houses had that same blue light flickering in their windows. Not just 1 or 2, but at least a dozen spread throughout the neighborhood. "Hey, Davis, you seeing this?" Collins asked, pointing to a house on our left. "What kind of light is that? Looks almost like..." He paused, searching for the right word. "Like a pulse," I finished. The blue glow throbbed in steady rhythm, and I could swear I heard a faint humming even through our closed windows. My hands started to shake as memories of Jake and Tom came flooding back. The house at 892 Pine Street was a modest, 2-story colonial with a large front porch. Every window glowed with that same blue light, and the humming was clearly audible now. It seemed to come from the ground itself, vibrating up through our feet. A young woman stood on the sidewalk crying. "I'm Rebecca Morrison," she said as we approached. "It's my family, my parents, my brother, my sister. They were normal when I left for work yesterday, but when I came home tonight..." She gestured helplessly at the house. "What exactly are they doing?" Collins asked, pulling out his notepad. He was still treating this like a routine call, not understanding the danger we were walking into. "They're just sitting there," Rebecca said. "All of them, in the living room. They won't talk to me, won't move, and their eyes..." She shuddered. "Their eyes are all white. Plus there's this weird light coming from them, and they're making this humming sound." Collins looked at me for confirmation that this sounded as crazy to me as it did to him. But I knew exactly what Rebecca was describing. "We need to call for backup," I told him, "and we need to evacuate the surrounding houses." "For what?" Collins asked. "Some people humming with their eyes rolled back? Maybe it's some kind of religious thing or a medical condition affecting multiple family members." He was already walking toward the front door. I grabbed his arm. "Trust me on this. Whatever's in that house, it's dangerous. It's what happened to my last partner." But Collins shook me off, probably thinking I was having another stress episode. The front door stood wide open, blue light spilling out like water. Collins stepped inside while I reluctantly followed, every instinct screaming at me to run. The humming grew louder, joined by additional voices creating complex harmonies. In the living room, 4 people sat on the couch and chairs in perfect alignment. An older couple who must have been Rebecca's parents, a teenage boy, and a young woman in her 20s. All of them hovered 6 inches above their seats, skin translucent gray, eyes completely white. Blue light pulsed through their veins in synchronized patterns. Their mouths hung open, emitting that ethereal humming that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my skull. The sweet medicinal smell hung thick in the air. "Holy shit," Collins breathed. He reached for his radio, but before he could key the mic, all 4 family members turned their heads toward us in perfect unison. The movement was smooth and mechanical, like dolls controlled by the same puppeteer. The humming intensified, and I felt a strange pulling sensation in my chest. The blue light seemed to be reaching for us, trying to draw us in. Collins took a step forward, his eyes beginning to glaze over. I tackled him, knocking us both to the floor. "Don't let them touch you!" I shouted, dragging him toward the door. But it was too late. The blue light had already made contact with his hand where he'd braced himself during the fall. The familiar transformation began immediately. Collins went rigid, his back arching as the light flowed up his arm and spread through his body. His eyes rolled back, showing only white, and he began to rise slowly into the air. Now there were 5 of them, humming in harmony. 5 people floating in that blue radiance while I stood helpless in the doorway. I thought about Jake, about Tom, about how many others might have been consumed by whatever this thing was. Rebecca grabbed my arm from behind. "We have to help them," she cried, trying to push past me into the room. I held her back, knowing that touching any of those floating people would add her to their ranks. "There's nothing we can do for them now," I said, pulling her away from the house. "We need to get out of here and warn everyone else." But as we stepped onto the front porch, I saw that it might already be too late. More houses throughout the neighborhood now pulsed with blue light. Not just the ones I'd noticed on the drive over, but dozens more. The humming had grown louder too, creating a complex symphony that seemed to be building toward something. I called dispatch on my personal phone since Collins had our radio. "This is Paramedic Davis. We have a major emergency at 892 Pine Street. I need all available units, fire department, and hazmat team, and evacuate everything within a 6-block radius of Pine and Westbrook." "Davis, slow down," came the dispatcher's voice. "What kind of emergency are we talking about?" Once again, I struggled to find words that wouldn't make me sound insane. "Some kind of chemical exposure causing mass hallucinations and altered mental states," I said, settling on the closest official explanation I could think of. "Multiple victims showing identical symptoms. Potentially airborne contamination." That got their attention. Within 10 minutes, the street filled with emergency vehicles. Fire trucks, police cars, more ambulances, and a hazmat team in full protective gear. I briefed the incident commander, sticking to clinical descriptions and avoiding any mention of floating people or supernatural lights. The first hazmat team entered the Morrison house while Rebecca and I waited behind the command vehicle. Through the open door, we could see the blue light pulsing brighter than before. The humming had grown so loud it was audible even over the diesel engines of the fire trucks. "Team 1 to command," came a voice over the radio. We've got 5 individuals in the living room showing signs of severe neurological distress. They appear to be experiencing some kind of seizure activity. We're going to need stretchers and sedation." But a moment later, the same voice came back, sounding confused. "Command, disregard previous transmission. The living room is empty. No sign of the reported victims." The lead hazmat technician emerged from the house, pulling off his helmet. "Nobody in there, Command. House is clean." I ran toward the house despite protests from the incident commander. The living room stood empty, just like Tom's bedroom had been weeks earlier. No floating people, no blue light, no humming. Even the sweet smell was gone. Colin's medical bag sat on the floor where he'd dropped it, but Collins himself had vanished without a trace. Just like Jake, just like Tom, just like the Morrison family. There were 5 people in here, I insisted to anyone who would listen. My partner Collins, and the entire Morrison family. They were all affected by some kind of contamination. But without any physical evidence, my claim sounded increasingly desperate. Rebecca backed up my story initially, describing exactly what we'd both witnessed. But as the night wore on and the investigators found nothing, her account began to change. "Maybe I was mistaken," she said finally. "Maybe my family went to stay with relatives and forgot to tell me." The official report listed Collins as missing under suspicious circumstances, just like Jake. The Morrison family was reported as missing persons, but with no signs of foul play or forced entry, the case received minimal resources. I was placed on administrative leave pending another psychological evaluation. This time, the department psychiatrist wasn't as sympathetic. "Officer Davis, you've now reported 2 separate incidents involving people mysteriously floating and emitting light. Both times, the alleged victims vanished without a trace. Don't you think it's more likely that you're experiencing some form of recurring psychotic episode?" I wanted to argue, to make him understand that something real and dangerous was happening in our town. But how could I prove it? There were no witnesses who stuck to their stories, no physical evidence, no documentation of any kind. They put me on indefinite medical leave and strongly suggested I consider early retirement. At 32 years old, my career as a paramedic was effectively over. But I knew I couldn't just walk away and let this thing continue consuming people. I spent my days researching similar incidents in other towns, looking for patterns or explanations. The internet provided plenty of theories, but no solid answers. Some posts described identical phenomena in small towns across the country, but most were dismissed as hoaxes or urban legends. The nights were worse. The phone calls resumed, but now they came from multiple numbers. Sometimes I would answer and hear just one voice humming, sometimes dozens in perfect harmony. I started recognizing some of the voices. Jake's tenor, Collins's baritone, what might have been Tom's deeper bass notes. I bought a new phone, changed my number again, even got a different service provider. It didn't matter. The calls always found me. And with each passing night, more voices joined the chorus. 3 weeks into my medical leave, I drove through the neighborhood again. The blue lights had spread even further, now visible in houses throughout a 12-block area. But during the day, everything looked normal. People went to work, children played in yards, life continued as if nothing was happening. I started following some of the residents, trying to document who lived in the affected houses. But every time I attempted to approach them or take photographs, they would vanish. Not obviously or dramatically, just a gradual fading until they were gone entirely. The local news never reported on the missing paramedics or the Morrison family. When I checked police databases using my emergency services login, I found no missing person reports filed for any of them. It was as if They had never existed at all. That's when I realized the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about people disappearing. It was about them being erased completely from reality, leaving only those who had directly witnessed their transformation with any memory of them. I tested this theory by visiting Jake's apartment. According to the building manager, apartment 4B had been vacant for 6 months. Jake's name wasn't on any lease agreements or rental applications. His personnel file at the ambulance service showed no record of him ever being employed there. The same thing had happened with Collins and the Morrison family. Official records showed they had never existed. Only I remembered them, and my credibility was already shot due to my psychological episodes. I was alone with this knowledge, watching helplessly as the blue lights spread night after night to more houses throughout the town. The humming grew louder and more complex, creating patterns that seemed almost musical in their precision. On the night of December 31st, something changed. Instead of the usual midnight phone call, my doorbell rang at exactly 12 a.m. I looked through the peephole and saw Jake standing on my front porch, looking exactly as he had the night he disappeared. His skin had that translucent gray quality I remembered, and blue light pulsed through his veins. His eyes were completely white, but somehow I could tell he was looking directly at me. When he opened his mouth, that ethereal humming filled the air. "Davis," he said, though his lips didn't match the words. "Come outside. We need to show you something important." His voice sounded normal, almost comforting, but I knew it was a trap. I backed away from the door, but the humming grew louder. Through my windows, I could see blue light pulsing from every house on my street. The entire neighborhood had been consumed while I wasn't paying attention. My phone rang. When I answered, I heard Colin's voice mixed with the humming. "It doesn't hurt, Davis. It's actually peaceful. You stop worrying about everything. All the stress and fear just goes away." More voices joined in. Tom, the Morrison family, dozens of others I didn't recognize, all of them trying to convince me to come outside, to join them in whatever they had become. But I remembered the terror in their eyes during those first moments of transformation. Whatever peace they claimed to feel now wasn't genuine. It was the absence of everything that made them human. I stayed inside, barricading my doors and windows with furniture. The humming continued all night, sometimes soft and inviting, sometimes building to an overwhelming crescendo that made the walls vibrate. Blue light seeped through every crack and crevice, reaching for me like searching fingers. When dawn broke, the humming stopped and the blue light faded. I looked outside to see my neighborhood returning to its daytime normalcy. People emerged from their houses to collect newspapers and walk dogs, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. But I knew better now. During the day, they were still human enough to maintain the illusion of normal life. At night, they transformed into something else entirely, working together towards some unknown purpose. I packed a bag and left town that morning, driving until I found a motel 50 miles away. The distance seemed to break their connection to me. No more phone calls, no more visits from transformed friends, just blessed silence. For 6 months, I lived like a nomad, moving from town to town, taking odd jobs to pay for food and lodging. I avoided anywhere that might need paramedic services, afraid that my presence would somehow trigger the same phenomenon. But eventually, I had to stop running. I found work as a security guard at a shopping mall in a city 300 miles from my hometown. The pay was terrible and the work boring, but it was anonymous and safe. I thought I'd escaped whatever force had consumed my town. I was wrong. Last Tuesday, I got a call from the mall manager asking me to check on some unusual activity in the electronics store. Customers had complained about a strange blue light coming from the television display area. When I arrived at the store, I found 12 flat-screen televisions all showing the same image. A static blue glow that pulsed in a familiar rhythm. And from the speakers, barely audible but unmistakable, came the sound of distant humming. On the screens, faces began to appear in the blue light. Jake, Colin's Tom, the Morrison family, and dozens of others I'd never seen before. They were all looking directly at me, their white eyes somehow tracking my movement as I backed away from the display. The humming grew louder, joined by more voices, creating that same complex harmony I remembered from my hometown. Other shoppers stopped to watch the televisions, their expressions becoming slack and dreamy. Several of them took steps closer to the screens, hands outstretched as if reaching for the blue light. I ran through the mall, shouting for people to get away from the electronics store, to evacuate the building. Most ignored me or looked at me like I was crazy. Security cameras throughout the mall began displaying that same blue glow, and the humming echoed from speakers in every store. I made it to my car and drove straight to the police station, trying to explain what was happening. The desk sergeant listened patiently, then suggested I might want to speak with someone about my stress levels. Through the windows, I could see blue light beginning to pulse from televisions in the station's waiting area. It's spreading faster now, using electronic devices to reach new populations. Television sets, computer screens, smartphones, any device capable of displaying that blue light becomes a conduit for whatever force has been consuming people. I'm writing this account from a cabin in the mountains, miles from the nearest cell tower or cable line. It's the only place I've found where the blue light can't reach me, but I know it's only temporary. The network of affected devices grows larger every day, and eventually it will find me here too. If you receive any calls with strange humming sounds, don't answer them. If you see blue light pulsing from electronic devices, don't look directly at it. And whatever you do, don't let it touch you. Once that blue light makes contact, you become part of something that isn't quite human anymore. I don't know what it wants or where it came from. I only know that it's patient, persistent, and growing stronger every night. Soon, there may be nowhere left to run. The humming is starting again outside my cabin. I can see blue light reflecting off the trees getting closer. They've found me. If anyone reads this, remember, they look like people you know. They sound like people you care about, but they're not human anymore. Don't trust them. Don't follow them. And whatever you do, don't let the blue light touch you. The door is opening. Jake is here, smiling at me with those white, empty eyes. Behind him stand Colin's Tom, the Morrison family, and hundreds of others I don't recognize, all of them humming in perfect harmony. It's beautiful, actually. Peaceful. Just like Colin said, maybe it's time to stop running.